Don't you just hate it when we see a player in baseball have a couple tremendous seasons or a tremendous start to their career, and it looks like that player is on a quick track to the Hall of Fame, or at least have a Hall of Fame caliber career, only for it to get derailed by injuries? I feel like Eric Davis from the Reds was a great example of this. He was stealing a ton of bases, hitting for a lot of power, and winning Gold Gloves until injuries derailed his career, which is a shame because it really looked like we were seeing something special out of him and what would blossom into a Hall of Fame career. Now, in the current game of baseball, there is a name that comes to mind for this type of player, and that is Christian Yelich. Now, I know another name for this type of player could be Mike Trout, but Mike Trout is a little bit different than Christian Yelich in this regard, just because Mike Trout came up and he was instantly an MVP player, and if he hung up the cleats today, he would still make it to the Hall of Fame. Christian Yelich wasn't like that. Yelich started his career with the Miami Marlins, and he was really never expected to be a big power guy. He had a very good bat to ball skill, and he was always hitting for a high average. He had 240 at-bats in his rookie year, and he hit 288 with a 370 on base, which is pretty solid for a rookie. He also stole 10 bases, but he only hit 4 home runs. And in his whole career with the Marlins, he never hit more than 21 home runs, which is perfectly fine. He just didn't seem like the type of player who's going to hit a lot of home runs. He did look like the type of player who's going to win a batting title and do multiple things well. In fact, he won a Gold Glove in his first full season in 2014, and in 2016, he received MVP votes for the first time. He came in 19th, so he wasn't extremely high up in the voting, but he also won a Silver Slugger that year, and he had 21 home runs with 98 RBI. He slashed 298, 376 on base, and an 859 OPS for 135 OPS plus. Just a very good all-around season. And that looked like the type of player Christian Yelich was going to evolve into, a very, very good player and a very reliable player. He had never hit under 280 in his entire career with Miami, but he also never put up an OPS higher than 859. Well, those days of having an OPS in the 800s wouldn't last long. After the 2017 season, he was traded in that famous fire sale from the Miami Marlins, which included getting rid of Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees, Marcelo Zuna to the Cardinals, and of course Christian Yelich to the Brewers. The Marlins would receive Lewis Brinson, Monte Harrison, Isan Diaz, and Jordan Yamamoto in that trade. All those guys were top prospects in the Brewers system, with Lewis Brinson being like the prize of that deal. But we can close the book on that trade because it was an absolute steal for the Brewers. Even though all those guys were top prospects for the Brewers, 0 of them made significant impact for the Marlins. In fact, they all made a negative impact. Isan Diaz has a negative 2.9 WAR and 463 at bat. Jordan Yamamoto is out of the league already. He retired early because he wasn't very good. Lewis Brinson combined for a negative 3.6 WAR in his career, being the prize of that trade. And Monte Harrison doesn't even play baseball anymore. He plays college football now. That's right, the Marlins drove this man to play an entirely different sport. But anyway, 2018, the first year with Milwaukee Brewers, and we saw a tremendous power surge from Christian Yelich, one that I don't think really any of us expected when he was with the Marlins. This was his age 26 season and basically had a career year in everything. He had 326 with a 402 on base percentage and a 598 slugging for an even 1000 OPS and a 164 OPS plus. And he won the MVP. He was an all-star and he won the Silver Slugger as well. Just a tremendous season for him. And he was almost the unanimous MVP, with Jacob deGrom getting the only other first place vote. And after this MVP type of year, it looked like we were going to get this type of year going forward out of Christian Yelich. And the next year would prove that. Christian Yelich was having another amazing season, and it looked like he was going to be an MVP frontrunner. In fact, he was, along with Cody Bellinger. And it was basically an even race throughout the whole year between these two players, and everyone knew it. These two were ahead of everyone, and even in July, MLB made a commercial about those two being the head of the MVP race.
How about a game of MVP?
All right, let's do it.
And at the beginning of September, it looked like Christian Yelich was starting to pull a little forward in the MVP race and he would claim it. But unfortunately, on September 10th, Yelich would foul a ball into his right knee and fracture his kneecap, and he'd be out for the remainder of the 2019 season. And this would seal the win for Cody Bellinger. He would go on to win the MVP. Christian Yelich would finish second, and Anthony Rendon would come in third. And even though he played 26 games less than Cody Bellinger, he would still get 10 first place votes. And I can't really blame anyone for still voting for Christian Yelich. He just had a ridiculous year. He led the league in batting, winning his second batting title, had an OBP of 429 with a slugging percentage of 671, and his OPS was 1100, 100 points higher than his previous year where he actually won the MVP. He hit 44 home runs and stole 30 bases. And it's just crazy that he did so much better than he did in his year where he actually won the MVP. After these back-to-back years, it looked like Christian Yelich was going to continue on his torrid pace and tear the cover off the ball for the rest of his career. But the next year was 20 2020, and needless to say, it was a very strange year for all of us. And it was also a strange year for Christian Yelich, and not in a good way. His slash line was a very interesting one. He only hit 205, but he still got on base at a 356 clip, and his slugging percentage was only 430, giving him an OPS of 786 and an OPS plus of 110. That's a very strange year. He was still an above league average hitter in terms of OPS plus, even though he only hit 205. But there are a couple things to note here. He was in the 99th percentile in exit velocity, and his batting average on balls in play was down significantly at 259 compared to 355 in the year prior. So it looked like he was running into a little bit of bad luck this year. This is also just a 2-month sample size, which is a decent amount of time, but we've seen great players have stretches during a season where they aren't doing very well over a couple months, but overall their body of work still ends up being really good. However, this was a 60-game season, so Christian Yelich wouldn't have the chance to right the ship in terms of overall production. One bad thing to note here, though, is that his strikeout rate was significantly higher this year. He struck out 76 times in just 200 at-bats, compared to striking out 118 times in 489 at-bats in 2019. So I don't know if this was an issue of injuries starting this season, or if it was just kind of a strange year for him in general. Regardless, it was just a strange year, and I think we're all expecting Christian Yelich to get back to it in 2021. But unfortunately, 2020 was the first year of kind of a downward spiral for Christian Yelich, and it came to surface that he was dealing with a lot of lower back issues. And it was kind of revealed that he'd been dealing with lower back issues ever since his career in Miami, and even back before he made it to the bigs and the minors. It has just been an ongoing thing, but 2021 has started to rear its ugly head, and it was just a little bit worse, a little bit more nagging, and we were seeing it to develop into something more. He would go on to have a really rough 2021 and only play 117 games because of these issues. And in those 117 games, he did not play very well. He hit 248 with a 362 on base and a 736 overall OPS and just a 101 OPS plus. Now I know he still got on base at a high clip, but he was barely a little bit above league average in terms of hitting in 2021. And back issues are just a nagging thing. Once they start, it's really hard for them to get a ton better, and the chances of them recurring are extremely high. So we had to wonder if we're ever going to see the same Christian Yelich again, or even a highly productive Christian Yelich at this point. Back injuries just sap a lot of power, and to put this in perspective, his slugging percentage in 2021 was barely above half of what it was in 2019, where he was runner-up in the MVP, which is absurd. But in 2022, we would see a little bit better version of Christian Yelich. He did have around the same batting average, around the same OPS, but the OPS plus was a little bit higher at 109. We also did see him play 154 games, which is very encouraging. So maybe he was putting these injuries behind him, maybe he was getting a little bit better at managing them, and hopefully we would continue to see this trend. And we can only hope we do at this point, because this was his age 30 season, and back injuries don't really get better after you're 30. They usually get worse, or they usually just recur more often. However, in 2023, he had a better year. He hit 278 with a 370 on base and a 447 slugging percentage for an OPS plus of 121. He hit 19 home runs, more than his previous year of 14, and much better in his 2021 year of 9. He was looking like the Christian Yelich we saw in Miami, which is a very good player. So if you're Milwaukee, you got to be happy that Christian Yelich is back to that level. And I don't really think you can expect any more from him at this point. He's in his 30s, he's just managing his back pretty well, and I think the baseball world was just happy that he's not trending downwards even further. And more importantly, he's been on the field for most of the year of the past 2 seasons. We all just wanted to see Yelich continue to play the majority of every year. So we were kind of hoping for a similar year in 2024. But much to my surprise and the baseball world surprise, in 2024, Christian Yelich got off to one of the best starts he's had in his career. Through the beginning of April, he was hitting 333 with 5 home runs with a 422 on base and a 744 slugging percentage, which puts him at an 1166 OPS. It looked like MVP Yelich was back, but unfortunately on April 12th, Christian Yelich would leave the game with lower back pain, which was such a tough scene because he's been dealing with this for so long. He just got off to the best start he's had in years. We're all super excited for Christian to be back to that MVP form. Christian even said himself that this was super frustrating for him because he's putting so much work to just feel good, and he's just trying to get back to being healthy and get back to where he once was. After he went on the IL, he actually came back relatively quickly. He came back on May 8th, and he didn't really hit for much power when he came back. He didn't hit another home run until May 29th, but he was still hitting pretty well, and at the end of the month, he still had an OPS of 970 on the season. He hit pretty decently all the way through June, and the biggest sign that he might be back is that in July, he's been hitting for more power. 3 doubles and 3 home runs through July 10th on the month, and overall on the season, he was having a really good year. His current slash line is 335 with a 417 on base and a .34 slugging percentage for an OPS of 951 and an OPS plus of 165. He also has 11 home runs and a 2.7 WAR, and he was voted to be an all-star starter for the first time since 2019. He is currently leading the league in batting average. He's leading the league in on-base percentage. He's just having a tremendous year. And to put this in perspective, his OPS plus right now is higher than it was when he won his MVP. And I'm just so happy that he's having a good year, and the baseball world is happy as well. And I feel like his resurgence or comeback isn't getting talked about enough. Yeah, he's not having the type of year that he had in 2018 or 2019 in terms of home runs, but these are still incredibly good numbers that he's putting up. And you know what? I don't think it's too late for Christian Yelich to put up enough seasons like this together to make him a Hall of Famer. Right now, he has 42.4 career wins above replacement, and it's his age 32 season. The average Hall of Famer, or what it usually takes for a player to make the Hall of Fame, is around 60 wins above replacement over their career. And if Christian Yelich keeps putting up these numbers, playing well, and more importantly, just manages his back injuries and stays on the field for a significant period of time in every year, I think it's very possible that he could be a sneaky candidate to make the Hall of Fame. And even if he doesn't make the Hall of Fame, we get to see Christian Yelich's resurgence, and I don't think many of us thought he would get to this type of level of production ever again. And I hope he continues this type of production. This also gives me hope for other players who have experienced the same type of injuries that Christian Yelich has had, and maybe we can see other type of players like this have resurgences as well.